Alright, also, last time I played the dwarf and I managed to clean up the Shaloran, dungeon, the Shaloran camp. So, this episode I was thinking, why not just jump in with these guys and we'll read the lore and finish it off and be done with it. I'll also note that I recently went and into like all the settings and I turned off all the chat here. So I found out that if you go to game options and you go over here to like chat message filters, you can select your configure, you can turn them all off so you don't have to see all that. You can go like north and chat channels and you can turn all this stuff off so you don't have to listen to it. And that will, make it so that you don't have to constantly have to wait. You can also do other stuff in here, like you can rest before explore. You can always show lore pop up if you want, or if you can turn it off if you don't. I'll keep it on though for you guys just so you can see it. Alright, so I'm gonna make my way down to the Shaloran capital. This was a Shadow Blade I made before the other one I showed you. He did alright, but you didn't get to see any of it, which is kind of a letdown. He also got the Poisonous achievement from the Assassin Lord. That actually gives you a pop-up message. You didn't get to see it though, which is too bad. I'm not sure I can show it in any way either. No more? Well, I can show you that I got it, I guess. I can go... No, I guess I can't. There's no real lore for the Assassin Lord. Is there achievements? Yes, there is. Okay, so here's like Poisonous. So I got this the first time of this guy, and I saw the Assassin Lord. Or, oh yeah, because achievements don't show up, I guess, unless you are logged in. So this guy did get it first, but oh well. Alright, so lore time. The Day of the Spellblaze was the last one we did. Let's go to this right here, Spellblaze Chronicles, The Change of Maj'Eyal. And we will bring up the voices yet again. So one moment while I get that going.
The Spellblaze Chronicles 6, A Change to Maj'Eyal, from the memoirs of Maj'Eyal, leader of the Grand Council of Elvia. Chapter 6, A Change to Maj'Eyal. Perhaps what happened will never be truly understood. What Chateau ruins survived the Spellblaze have been little touched since. The burned hands learned its lesson. But we know that Ephinus and his mages lost control somehow. However jealousy and balance they wrought will come entangled. At the moment they tried to connect to our far portals, the imbalance was reverberated, resonated, magnified beyond control. The far portal in the crystal tower imploded in a fraction of a second, killing all within, crushing the land about. The energies of the Chateau relics then erupted in a blaze of white light, turning the air to fire and ground to ruin. The blaze swept eastward, rolling over our battle with the unstoppable destructive force, and then carrying on towards the Floran lands. Most of the ancient forests of Chateau were ripped from their roots, and the lands cursed ever since. Meanwhile, the other far portals all over Maj'Eyal erupted, white stone crackling, and vast swaths and energy spilling forth. All the Kornak lands to the west were turned to desert. The dwarven halls of Korhek crumpled, and mid-vale plains were risen up as the mountains in Lake Nura formed in their wake. In the south, the ancient tower of Derfell was collapsed, and the forest besides it morphed into ever-boiling scar of lava and blackened earth. Far in the east, the Narlan far portal, the largest of all Maj'Eyal, disappeared in a vast earthquake that swallowed everything for miles around, and boiling water spewed up to fill its cavernous depths. And whilst this destruction was wrought, the incredible energies disrupted all the mana flow around Maj'Eyal. Streams of energy that followed set, slowly changing course, now were flooded and droughted, warped and split. The spreads and elements were in vast disarray, and any attuned to magic suddenly found themselves far away from their accustomed power sources. Even the heavens were changed. The wandering star of war disappeared, the constellations were tilted off their normal course, and the seasons rest harsher since. Some say the moons dimmed and the sun went whiter after that day. I do not know. The whole world has seemed darker to me. The numbers killed are beyond count. The initial destruction took at least 5 million lives, and the terror that followed claimed far more. For though it had been a day of tragedy and inimaginable woe, it was to be followed by a bloody age of darkness and torment. But none of this I knew as I lay weeping in the aftermath, cradled in my lap the one life I cared about. In abject misery, I called on all the healing powers I could to bring her back to me, but for one moment. Her heart beat softly and her eyes opened, but seemed glassy and far away. "Linnale," I whispered, and her dark eyes turned towards my face. I tried to mumble an apology, to say I was sorry and was unable to help her, but emotions overcame my voice. Her gaze at me was empty, as if she looked right through me, before she turned her eyes away. Slowly she raised a hand to an amulet around her neck, and with a light touch it glowed and crackled. Her eyes closed again, but I could feel the power of the artifact pumping into her, strengthening her heartbeat and mending her flesh. She was unconscious and still badly wounded, but for now the mortal threat was gone. My thoughts were mixed, glad she was no longer at death's door, but worried she might relapse, and at the back of my mind scared at the empty look she had given to me. Could she possibly forgive my part in this? Carefully I picked up her frail body and began the journey back to Ivala. 2 days it took on foot, through blasted and ruined ground. On the passage I came across other survivors, refugees now leaving their destroyed homes, heading to the city to seek shelter. I tried to nurse Linnale as best I could, giving her water during brief periods of waking and dressing her wounds, but true healing could not happen until I reached the city. Elvia was quiet chaos, oppressed by fear and uncertainty, an air of dread filling all the streets. The news had broken that our army had been entirely wiped out. There would be no loved ones returning to their families, and the sound of stifled mourning was all to be heard in all corners of the city. I took Linnale straight to the healing grounds in the palace, and gave her to the doctors with the strictest instructions. They were swathed by casualties, but followed my orders without question, tending immediately to her wounds and applying tinctures and regenerative spells. It was as I watched over her quietly that a party bustled loudly into the grounds. I recognized at the head was Perissa, senior court official. At her side was an elderly human, who immediately went to where Linnale lay. "General Aaron," announced Perissa loudly. "I heard you were here, but I could scarce believe it. Thank the Freds you have returned to us. This is a grave time. We must talk at once." But I ignored her as I saw the human touch Linnale's hand, and her eyes gently open. "Kulin," she murmured softly. "Aye, it is me, my lady," he said quietly. "I've been sent here by your father. He has ordered me to pass to you this." And with that he brought forth a golden ring set with very ruby. I recognized it immediately as the ring of Karkrul, worn by the mighty Torfel. Linnale sat up quickly, wincing from the pain, but with her eyes locked on the ring as it was placed in her hand. "But my father—" "I'm sorry, my lady. It brings me great sorrow to bear you this news. Your father and his court are dead. His last act was to instruct me to bring this ring to you and your sister Nera," he said, glancing about. "Is she—" He saw the look in Linnale's eyes and dipped his head disappointedly. "I see. I am terribly sorry. It becomes my duty then, my lady, to declare you the new leader of Karkrul." "General Arian!" ejected Perisia. "I really must speak with you now." "Wait!" I barked, and turned to the human Queen. "What is happening here? How could one such as Torfel be killed?" The man looked at me, and with a willing sadness in his eyes, before turning to address Linnale. "Yesterday, the day after the terrible Spellblaze, as we began some attempt at reconstruction, still struggling to realign our mana paths, a murmur began amongst the people. It spoke thus: the Karkrul circles and mages have betrayed the ordinary people. They accused us of siding with the elves to destroy non-mages, of toying with terrible powers beyond our control, of deliberately massacring them out of evil and malice. We could not logic with them, and would listen to no reason, and they rose up in violent anger. They attacked many of us, with farming instruments and whatever weapons they could find. Our defenses were weak, and striking back just made the crowd fiercer. We retreated to your father's home, begging for help, but he shook his head and said he could not fight back. They came for us then, storming his palace, and Torfel ordered all to put up no resistance. He handed me his ring, saying to seek you out in Elva, and then stepped outside to face the crowds. He didn't resist. The people, they... He lapsed into sudden silence and shaking his head in sorrow. He looked like he wanted to cry, but had no tears left to shed. Denali's face was graven, and she stared hard at the ring. Parisa grabbed me then and turned me to her attention. This is what I need to speak with you about, General Aaron. If this human tale is to be believed, then we are in very grave danger. Scout reports suggest there's a body of humans coming here from the north as we speak. From what this human says, they seek retribution. They wish to slaughter all of us. The storm of wrath lies on our border, and we are defenseless. We need you to desperately organize our defense to protect our city and our people. I felt numb. The events overwhelmed me. But who leads us, I said. There is no one. What royals are known to be alive are not suited. We are entering a time of war, a terrible time with no other we have faced. We need military leadership. You, General Aaron, you must be our leader. I held Parisa's gaze then and saw the wisdom in her words. My duty as a Shaloran was clear, but my heart tremored as I turned to look at Denali. This be our path, then, Aaron, she said quietly, raising herself from the bed and carefully placing the ring on her middle finger of her right hand. I must tend to my people, and you to yours. We will meet again. We will not meet again. But your wounds, I tried to eject. Will never heal, she cried, pain dripping from her voice. Her eyes were like cold, impenetrable ice, a smoldering anger deep within. Come, Callan, we must leave this place, and with that they departed. Denali walked tall and proud in spite of her injuries. I closed off my heart and my emotions then, lest they overwhelm me. My duty was before me, and the events of the past had to be locked away from my memory. The ceremony was organized in under an hour, and I was anointed leader of the Grand Council of Elvia, head of the Shaloran people. On my orders, Rangers began transporting in survivors from outpost settlements, whilst I commanded our remaining mages to begin a new endeavor around our city walls. The first waves of the storm of hate came the next day. Human peasants and farmers, ordinary workers, armed poorly, they looted swords and spears badly wielded. I stood alone at the gates as they approached, mooncutter in my hand. When the first few charged at me, I thrust the blade into the soil and tore a great chasm in the earth, and mages summoned forth mist and smoke that rose from the ground and began to surround the whole city. As the peasants stumbled in confusion, archers started firing from our walls. But few made it through the smoke and arrows I took on, tearing Mooncutter through their flesh with little resistance. Their blood gushed out in the gallons of drenching our ground, staining my skin. It was like a warm shower over my boiling emotions, a bathe of blood to wash over my sins. The Shroud of Maj'Eyal was begun, as our whole city was wreathed in cloud and smoke. Our shield, our mask, our hiding. It would last for centuries. The only dealings with the outside world being in pure secrecy. Alright, so there's number 6. Let's go to number 7. The Spellblaze Chronicles Into the Darkness, Chapter 7. We veiled our guilt, cloaked our crimes, though we had some communication with the outside through halfling traders and the odd disguised Shaloran adventurer. We remained mute to the world at large, hidden from their accusing gaze. Outside our quiet walls, others had not the luxury of hiding. The spell hunt was begun, and it knew no mercy. Ordinary people rose up against what they perceived as the arrogance of mages, a revolt against the power of the few that had ruined the lives of so many. Any suspected of sorcery or ties to the art were cruelly dealt with. There was sympathy for none, and many incidents fell victim to the unquenchable thirst for retribution. The madness swept across the whole of Maj'Eyal. Law and order had broken down. Armories, territories, and whole cities had been destroyed or ravaged by the Spellblaze, with many areas left completely uninhabitable. Kingdoms fell and tyrants arose. Bands picked the bones of civilization like vultures on a rotten corpse. An organization called the Ziggurat, fought dead long ago, came into resurgence, gaining popular support from the people in their anti-magic crusade. We heard of some mages going into hiding, but immediately being rooted out, or fleeing desperately from place to place. Dark tales also arose, and necromancers and fell wizards creating dungeons and strongholds, fending off or evading attacks and beginning reigns of terror. And one tale came to my ears of a group of mages that managed to band together and stay in hiding, through always on the run from the chasing Ziggurat. The story from outside was that they were led by a demon with fiery hair, fiercely glowing eyes, and hands wrapped in flames. That bot was blazing wrath and could be opposed by none. I knew the description well. I carried out my reign, my duty, taking care of the Shaloran people. We were safe from attackers, secure in our supplies through discreet trade, and slowly building back some of what we had lost. But both fear and shame prevented us from showing our face to the world. 15 long years passed before I woke one night in my council chambers, the crescent wintertide moon softly illuminating a shape near the end of my bed. The figure was tall and slim, wrapping in tight fitting wools and furs. Her crimson hair stirred gently as she stood with her back to me. Memories arose of a night long ago, in a more instant time, when younger me and younger her first became close. I barely dared whisper her name, afraid she might disappear, an apparition or a dream that could be broken by a spoken word. Linnally, I softly mouthed. She turned to me, and I saw those same dark eyes I remembered, but they were surrounded by lines of care, the markings of years of strain and responsibility clear on her face. Rising from my bed, I gathered a robe about me. I took a few steps towards her, but stopped, not able to move myself any further. I wanted to be near her, to put my arms around her, but it felt as if she were across a wide chasm from me, a gulf of time and pain between us. "I have come for help, Ariane," she said in a low voice, not quite meeting my gaze. "There be something I seek, and ye must aid me in achieving it. I do not understand, but I nod my assent. Get ye dressed and ready then. There be a long journey ahead of us." She gathered toward the window, her back towards me again, waiting as I put on a stralet mail and gathered my sword. When she noticed I was ready to levitate out, I followed. We whistled through the air, traveled northwards at great speed. The land swept beneath us, and the climate grew colder as we went further and further north. Hours passed in intrepid silence till we were flying above a snowy tundra. We soared past plains of white and gray before we reached a low range of hills. Here Linnally slowed and descended, and I went down beside her. We came to rest before a dark opening in the foot of the hills. Linnally stood for a while staring at the black cave. Fear radiated from her face, but her eyes were hard and determined. "It is here," she said quietly, her voice steady. I followed her gaze, trying to guess what secrets this remote place contained, but I could sense nothing special. She marched forward. I followed until we came right up to the shadowed opening. Linnally hesitated a moment, staring into blackness before finally stepping inside and being swallowed from sight. I could feel it then, the sensation that something ancient lay in its place. My skin tingled and my arcane attunement felt on fire. This dark cave held something mysterious force, secluded from all knowledge since the oldest day of Maj'Eyal. There was something here that could change the destiny of the world. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. And now, that's it for this character because he's out of money. So I'll just quickly go back to the main menu. Now we go with the last chapter. The Spellblaze Chronicle, Chapter 8, Forbidden. Light sprung from Linnally's staff, and she cast about a luminescence, revealing a narrow icy passageway that led downwards. It was deathly cold, and our breaths condensed in the clouds as we made our way down the winding tunnels. My skin pricked and my senses seemed on edge. "What is down here?" I asked, my curiosity all consuming. "Power," Linnally responded, not looking at me as she spake, continuing to follow the path. "The power be what I seek. I am afeared by mine people, but have not the strength to protect them, and I wouldn't like. With what to be here, perhaps I shall have power to make a safe haven. This be a place of legend amongst mine people, and I have scouted out over many years. Today I shall finally reach what lies at the center. And why do you need me?" She didn't respond, but carried onwards. We reached a split in the tunnel, and without hesitation, Linnally took the left path. It led further and further underground. We came to the blockages, but by arcane force the sources easily cleared away. As we passed through a large cavern, I sensed movement, and I drew Mooncutter quickly. What looked like a disembodied limb, or some great flashing worm, was drifting toward us pathetically. Linnally sent a blast of fire towards it. It squealed and went still. And then more movement, 100 movements. From crevices and holes in the walls and ceiling, there burst out dozens upon dozens of worm-like creatures, their maggoty bodies flapping vigorously, fanged mouths opening up and screaming torturous sounds. Linnell growled and began sending torrents of flame towards the approaching horde. I covered her back, slicing open their pale green flesh, and sending streaks of lightning through their ranks. In under a minute we had dispatched them all. I prodded a corpse with my foot, and it collapsed into sludge. What strange creatures, I commented. I looked at Linnell for some explanation, but she simply proceeded forward. I followed after, keeping my sword in hand and watching closely for further attacks. At the other end of the cavern, a wall of ice blocked our way. Linnell held up a ring of charcoal, and a jewel on it began to blaze. The ice melted away slowly, revealing a passage to another small chamber. This cold, crypt-like hollow was covered in smooth, glistening ice on all sides. The walls were square and straight, and the ancient pillars and marble were dotted about the room. On the pillars and walls were weird runes and symbols. I came close to studying some, but couldn't recognize them from any of my studies. What was this place? I asked, turning Linnell. It seems even older than Shaloran. She ran her hand over one of the walls, tracing the outlines of the door. It be a temple to Quecora, god of a race called the Wasai. They were killed off by the Shaloran long before our races were born. They did build this temple in honor of Quecora, and the last of them they did die here defending her. I looked about in awe. Though I had explored many Shaloran ruins, I hadn't seen anything like this. The architecture was simple but elegant. There was true beauty to it. I turned back to the door Linnell was examining. She was trying to open it, but was obviously struggling to find a way. There must be some key, some puzzle to open this, she muttered. But I can't solve it. The secret be lost to this time. She growled in anger and stood back. Holding out her staff, she unleashed a blast of arcane forces from it, finally splitting the stone door apart and tearing open a passage to a chamber beyond. Many things suddenly happened at once. From beyond I felt a pulse of energy, a huge surge of power that I had never felt before. Linnell was focused on it intensely. The noise came from all around of creatures moving asunder. From the cave we entered, from there was a shriek of 100 wailing voices, and the floor beneath our feet trembled. Rocks fell from the ceiling, and out burst horrific creatures with spiked limbs and smooth triangular faces, and from trembling ground arose a strange, ethereal being of light, with long tentacles for limbs. And as I turned to face these threats, I saw that in the previous caverns the worms had come back to life, and were now coalescing into a huge mass of putrid flesh. I tried to cut through the beings of light, but my sword barely slowed as it passed through it, and the flames I saw seemed to have little effect. It raised tentacle towards me, and an intensely bright beam of white light shone from it through my torso, filling my flesh with searing pain. I jumped back, and sent a wave of ice at it, tearing off a tentacle and pushing it further away. Meanwhile, Linnell had reduced one of the spiked creatures to a pile of ash, but her arcane shield was collapsing beneath the slashes of the other, and more were spilling from the ceiling. In an inch's way, the mass of worms was pressing through, and from the mouths of the filling bodies came splits of burning acid. We were at severe risk of getting surrounded in this confined space, and numbers too many to take on at once. Over here, shouted Linnell, as she dashed through the door she had split apart. I followed, slashed my blade through the mass of worms, causing it to lurch back, screeching in pain, and spearing a blast of lightning through one of the spiked creatures, splitting open its head. It continued to attack me, but I parried the cut and its arm off, dancing around it and reaching the doorway. With my back to the opening, I brought up the wall of water and sent it flying into the chamber, pushing the horrors away as it leapt backwards through the door. As soon as I had passed through, Linnell thrust her staff into the ground, and a pillar of rock rose upwards, sealing off the opening. I could hear thrashing and thumping sounds from the other side, but for now we seemed safe. What were those things? I asked incredulously, as I scanned around the open cavern for signs of any more creatures. It was a large space, but everything was still, and I could see no other entrances. Scions of Maj'Eyal, she responded calmly. The butcher god seeks to break his chains, but he needs more power, and here, in this dark, forgotten place, is part of that power he seeks. And what is here? What terrible power lies here that would draw both you and these horrors? Quecora, she said. Quecora? The god? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was it not slain by Shaloran? Aye, that it were. But there be power even in a slain god. Look behind ye, Arian. I turned then, wondering what she wanted me to behold. It took me a moment to see it, but when I did, I gasped in shock. The far wall of the great cavern was not merely a wall. It was covered in a thick layer of ice, but beneath at its center, I could make out a huge yellow eye, and around that eye, I could trace out a giant form. Dark gray skin covered a bulging head, topped with three giant curved horns, which sat atop a long thick body with 6 limbs. It was deathly still and chillingly ancient, seemingly more like a part of a rock than anything that had once been alive. I couldn't believe that what I was seeing, but I could feel it. In the corpse was still power, immense power, like nothing I had ever felt before. This be it, said Linnali, one of the few corpses of the gods left to find in Maj'Eyal, and I shall take its power as my own. This is insane, I shouted. You have no idea if that is safe or not. You don't know what it will do to you. She chuckled darkly. Aye, that be true, but that is why I have brought ye here. I looked at her in confusion, and she chuckled again. Ye still know not your purpose here. Did ye think I took ye here for protection? That I couldn't not handle these horrors on my own? No, there be a different reason I have brought ye. When I absorb this corpse, when I take its power for my own, I do not know what will become of me. It may kill me, or it may drive me mad. It may turn me into something terrible. Should that happen, Arian, you are the only one I know with the strength to kill me. The words hit me with a blow to the chest. Kill you? But I couldn't. But ye must, she said firmly. After all ye have done, all the torture ye have brought my life, ye owe me this. I looked deep into her eyes and saw the turmoil of emotions within the pain and agony of all that had befallen her, the hatred and blame of those who had wronged her, the guilt and shame for not being able to do more herself, and deep inside still some touch of love for me and what we had shared. I reached out my hand and stroked her soft hair, my fingers touching lightly against the side of her face. I leaned in close, and she closed her eyes, turning her face up to me as I moved my lips towards hers. No, she suddenly cried, pushing me back. It cannot be. She swiftly turned from me. I saw a tear drip down her cheek. The world has changed, Arian. I have a duty before me, and none can walk that path beside me. And with that she began to run, staff in hand, towards the great eye, whose dead gaze was locked behind a wall of ice. I sprinted after her, but she was faster, and with a running leap she thrust the base of her staff through the ice into the center of the god's eye. The ice cracked with a deafening thunder, and a giant yellow eye pulsed before exploding into a ball of light. I stopped and covered my eyes as white light flooded the room and shards of light flew through the air. I could barely make out Linnali, bathed in light, hanging with one hand from her staff, her hair and robes blown backwards as she reached forward with her other arm. Slowly and trepidly she placed her hand in the center of the ball of light where the eye had been, and the shadows danced about the caverns as she wrapped her fingers around the luminous spear before squeezing tight. The cavern shook, her staff shattered, the wall creaked and split before wholly blasting apart. The corpse of the dead god collapsed into a stream of silver, and the roaring cacophony rushed towards Linnali, tearing apart her robes and sinking into her skin. She floated in the air, limbs outstretched as a vast energy poured into her flesh. She opened her mouth as if to scream, and light burst out, and light spilled from her eyes and ears. The cavern quaked dangerously, and rocks fell from the walls and ceiling, but in seconds it was over, and the corpse of the god fully absorbed. The light in Linnali's eyes went out, and she dropped to the ground like a stone. Then the horrors broke through the collapsing cavern, having made an opening for him, and immediately they sped hungrily toward where Linnali lay. No, I cried, rushing to intercept him. You cannot have her. I sliced off the head of a spiked creature and put up a wall of fire ahead of the rest of them as I backed towards Linnali's body. She looked dead, with no sign of movement or breathing, but I had no time to check. The being of light and tentacles passed through my flames without resistance, and I ran sparks along my sword as I tore in the center of the monster. It shot light through my torso, and I coughed out blood, but I forced my sword in deeper and ran a flood of arcane energy through it, blowing the thing apart. More spiked creatures came, and I took care of my fling, whilst parrying and chopping on my left and sending waves of flame to my right. The mass of worms broke through the wall, and with it 2 more luminous horrors, and some fiend of darkness and nightmares. I could see behind others were spilling through. I put up a shield as rays of light shot towards me, and sent balls of frost back at them. One of the light beings fell, whilst the others were slowed. The dark thing came quickly, and the massive worms not far behind. So I sliced my sword across the ground, sending heat through it, and turned the stone into massive lava. The dark thing came around it and felt an aura of deathly cold from it as it approached. I hacked at its depth desperately, and shot back spear limbs towards my chest that seemed to suck all the strength from me. With a roar I shot a pulse of flames down my blade, and it burst apart. The worms charged directly over the lava, squealing in pain as the bulk of them were burned, but coming at me with speed. I adjusted my grip, getting ready to make a deft strokes to stay out of its range, but a lance of light then shot through my leg, dropping me to one knee with a scream. Massive worms rushed at me then. I dug my sword deep into the midst, but the worms crawled over my arms, sticking their acidic teeth into my flesh and reaching for my neck. With my left arm I cast a blanket of flames over them, bringing my arm along with the screeching worms. They pulled away slightly, but the beam of light was approaching from the side, a tentacle flaring up in lucent energy, and 3 spiked horrors were behind it. My right arm was burnt, my left leg injured, my mail poked with holes, and my mana reserves were running low. But I gritted my teeth in determination. I could not back from this fight. I rushed at the mass worms with my sword held firm. It exploded into a fiery mess. An intense wave of force and fire blasted across the cavern, turning the other horrors to ash, and even burning through the luminous beings, a low scream rising from it as the flames tore it apart. I gasped, not knowing whence the blaze had come, until I turned around and saw Luminali. She was standing tall, her robes burnt off, flames dancing up and down her skin, bright lights shining from her eyes. Heat seemed to radiate from her. I kept my grip on the sword, not sure if it was the Luminali I knew, or some other force born of the union with the dead god. She laughed suddenly, and it was a harsh laugh that I had not heard her make before. "What a fool I have been," she said almost to herself. "I brought ye here in case ye had to stop me, but now my power exceeds ye by a long distance. Ye would have no hope of opposing me." She made a low sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "Ah, but ye have no cause to worry. I am still me, mostly, and through pain and sacrifice I have achieved the power I desired, the power I need." I let my sword dip and breathed heavily, relief mingled and trepidation sweeping through me, whilst the withdrawing adrenaline of the battle left me feeling exhausted. I looked Luminali over, her pale skin now glowing, her eyes brimming with energy and vitality. I saw the power she was not in mere force, but she had taken on the ancient nature of the gods. A power forbidden to all creatures was now hers and hers alone. "What now?" I said quietly. "Now you go home, I go to make mine home, a sanctuary for me and my people. Will we meet again?" She smiled sadly. "Mayhaps, mayhaps not. The world changes quicker than predictions can tell, but if we do meet again, it shall be in a place that does not yet exist, the city of Anglewin." She raised an arm, then, and from it shot a tremendous pulse of arcane energy, the violet lights shooting to the roof of the cavern, and sprint deep through till it split the rock apart, right through the opening sky a mile above. The sunlight spilled down, splashing over Luminali's lit form. It had been many hours since this long night had begun. "But for now, farewell, Arian," she said as she began to float from the ground, and then she sped up and soared out of sight. I laid down on the cold stone, resting for a while, slowly healing my wounds and recovering my strength. I reflected on the events since the evening before, thinking back on the trials of all the races of Maj'Eyal. War, disease, and death threatened all equality. Was Luminali beyond that now? How would a taste of immortality affect her? It was then that thought for our race came to me. In ages past we had searched for immortality. Our ancestral leaders had obsessed over it, but out of vanity, pride, and fear, and death. What would the real effects be if all our society were to be gifted with it? With immortal life we might separate ourselves from the strife and wars of the world. It would give us a perspective beyond the petty squabbles and prideful competition of the other races. I dug through the ice and rocks and found still some trace of the dead god Krokul, faint though it were. I gathered all that was left and made the long journey back to Elvia. There I retreated to my labs, studying the reins for years before finally unlocking its secrets. It was thus that immortality for our race was born, and it has changed our outlook on the world ever since. We stood apart from the others then, not engaging in war, finding a new respect for life. It was not till Garruk the Devourer assaulted our gates in the Age of Pyre that we had cause for large-scale war again, and I rode out to face him in combat. But that isn't our tale, one indeed of many tales in the long, rich history of Tales Maj'Eyal. Alright, so
there's a little bit of the stories for the Spellblaze and the effects of like what happened to Elvia. Oops, sorry about that. I had to stop recording, but I have no more need for this character anymore anyways. So, back to main menu. And we are actually going to delete this character. Alright, so right now, next time you see me, I'll probably be doing a Shaloran elf, just to try and show off one more run with that type of character. And I also plan to do as well, perhaps a rogue character, so I'll probably do a halfling rogue. So I have yet to do a halfling, and even though I said they started showing, I haven't actually shown it, so we'll just do that. I'm not sure if I'll do an arcane blade, because I'm actually thinking I might want to do a run with an arcane blade. We'll see though. But for now, that's it for the lore, and I hope you guys enjoyed.